You ever meet someone once, and they rearrange your memory of time? Like everything before them fades a little, and everything after feels a little too loud? That night didn't feel like the start of anything. It was just another shift, another gray drizzle outside my window, another pizza box stacked on the passenger seat of my dented car. I was 22, halfway through a business degree I wasn't even sure I wanted. Life was quiet, repetitive. My apartment was the kind of place you didn't bother decorating because you knew you wouldn't stay. My roommate was basically a ghost, he practically lived at his girlfriend's, and I didn't mind. I liked the silence. It made it easier to pretend the loneliness was a choice. That night, the shift started like usual. The city was slick with rain, the kind that doesn't fall hard, just enough to blur the streetlights and make everything smell like wet pavement and pine. The first few deliveries were routine. A family with loud kids, a stoned teenager who tipped in quarters, a man who smiled too much and didn't say anything. Then came the last order. Large pepperoni, extra cheese. I remember the address, quiet, upscale, tucked away in a part of town I rarely delivered to. The kind of place where the lawns are trimmed with laser precision and the porch lights are warm instead of fluorescent. I pulled up to a 2-story house that looked like it belonged in a catalog. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. I double-checked the receipt, grabbed the box, and walked up to the door. When it opened, I forgot how to breathe. She stood there, maybe in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, I couldn't tell. She had long, red hair that fell over one shoulder like it had been styled by accident. Green eyes, calm and curious, met mine without hesitation. And she smiled, slow, amused, like she already knew something I didn't. She was wearing a cream sweater and dark jeans. Nothing flashy. But something about her felt cinematic. Not just beautiful, but composed, like she lived in a world where everything happened a beat slower. Where no one raised their voice. Where people spoke in undercurrents. I must have looked ridiculous, standing there soaked and wide-eyed, holding a cardboard box like it was sacred. I fumbled my words. Your pizza. She took the box from me, and our fingers brushed. A second. Less. But I felt it. That flicker of static, or nerves, or something I didn't have the language for yet. Then she looked at me, really looked, and tilted her head just slightly. If you're brave enough, she said, her voice soft, unhurried, stay. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. My heart tripped over itself. Was she joking? Flirting? Testing me? I couldn't tell. Everything about her was too still, too sure. I mumbled something stupid, something about having more deliveries, which wasn't even true. She smiled again, this time almost, sadly. Suit yourself, she said gently, and closed the door. I stood there in the rain, blinking at the wood grain of her front door like it might give me a second chance. My feet wouldn't move. My hands didn't know what to do. My chest felt tight, and not in a bad way, just full, like something important had almost happened and I hadn't been ready. Eventually, I stumbled back to my car, heart still racing. I sat behind the wheel and stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something different. But I looked the same. Same hoodie. Same tired eyes. Same kid who didn't know what to do with moments like that. I told myself it was nothing. Just a strange interaction. A pretty woman with a strange sense of humor. A weird coincidence. But her words, her voice, they looped in my head. If you're brave enough, stay. It wasn't the invitation that haunted me. It was the way she said it. Like she already knew I wouldn't. Like she'd said it before. Back at the apartment, I collapsed onto the couch without turning on the lights. The rain was louder now, tapping against the window like a quiet reminder. And in the dark, I saw her face again. That calm. That certainty. That quiet challenge. The pizza box was empty, but something in me wasn't. And for the first time in a long time, I wished I had been braver. I tried to forget her. I really did. I told myself it was just a strange night, a weird moment, nothing more. I buried it under class notes and takeout containers and late-night deliveries. But the thing about memories like that is, they don't ask for permission. They stay. Quietly. Softly. Waiting for stillness, and then they rise. That week passed in a blur. Same routes, same faces, same cold pizza smell that never really left my car. I'd find myself zoning out in the middle of lectures, staring at the corner of the whiteboard like her voice might float out from it. I couldn't remember half of what my professors were saying, but I remembered her exactly. The sweater. The eyes. The way she said it like she already knew my answer. If you're brave enough, stay. I kept hearing it in moments I didn't expect. Folding laundry. Wiping down counters. Waiting at red lights. It was frustrating, how clearly I could still see her in my head. She was a stranger. A customer. One interaction. But somehow, she felt unfinished. Sometimes at night, I'd sit by my window and imagine what would have happened if I'd said yes. Just stayed. Would she have invited me in? Would we have talked? Would it have just been a laugh? Or would it have meant something? I didn't know. And it was that not knowing that kept pulling at me. I started replaying the moment so often that I began to question the details. Had she really looked at me like that? Was there really something in her voice, or was I just projecting? I'd never had a moment like that before, and part of me felt ridiculous for holding on to it. But another part didn't want to let it go. The days blended. Rain came and went. I tried to stay busy. Told myself I needed to focus, on school, on getting through the semester. But no matter how hard I pushed forward, something inside me stayed stuck at her doorstep. And then there were the dreams. They weren't vivid, not exactly. More like feelings. I'd dream of standing in front of a closed door, hearing her voice behind it but never being able to open it. I'd wake up with the echo of her words still in my chest. Sometimes it made me angry. Other times, it just left me quiet. I didn't tell anyone about her. Not my roommate. Not the one friend I still talked to from high school. I kept her like a secret, afraid that saying it out loud would make it disappear, or worse, turn it into something that sounded stupid. One night, I was making ramen in the microwave, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a picture that made my breath catch. It was a stock photo in some random article about fall fashion. But the woman in it looked just like her. Same red hair. Same tilt of the head. That same quiet confidence. I stared at it for too long, until the microwave beeped and brought me back. I didn't even eat the ramen. Instead, I sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinet, and just let myself feel it. The pull. The confusion. The frustration. The ridiculous hope that maybe, just maybe, I might see her again. And in that silence, something softened. I realized I wasn't chasing her, not really. I was chasing what I felt in that moment. The possibility. The electricity. The way she looked at me like I was more than I believed I was. Like she saw something worth keeping. That scared me more than anything. Because once someone sees you like that, it's hard to go back to not seeing it yourself. I went to bed late that night. The streets outside were wet again. The window fogged from the inside. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of tires on slick asphalt. And for the first time, I whispered it out loud. I should have stayed. The words barely left my mouth, but they felt heavier than they should have. Like they'd been sitting in my throat this whole time, waiting. Maybe we don't regret the things we did. Maybe the real ache comes from the things we were too afraid to try. It was one of those rare Portland afternoons when the sun actually showed up. Not in a dramatic, summer kind of way, just a soft light that made everything feel less gray, like the city had exhaled. I didn't have anywhere to be, which was unusual, so I grabbed my headphones and decided to take a walk through the park near campus. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted air that didn't smell like pizza. The path curved gently under tall trees, and the grass was scattered with early blooms and people pretending it wasn't still slightly cold. Kids chased bubbles. A dog barked somewhere behind me. I scrolled through music on my phone, not really listening. Just moving. Breathing. Trying to feel a little less heavy. That's when I saw her. Or maybe, she found me. It happened so quickly, my brain didn't register it at first. I caught a flash of red in the corner of my vision, hair catching the sunlight like copper, and before I even turned fully, my heart dropped into my stomach. Her. Claire. She wasn't wearing anything dramatic. Just a green jacket, jeans, and a scarf looped loosely around her neck. But she moved the same way I remembered, like she wasn't in a hurry, like she knew where she was going, like the world would wait for her. I panicked. I looked down at my phone, suddenly interested in nothing at all. My hands fumbled with the screen as I tried to steady my breathing. What were the odds? This city wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. I told myself to keep walking. Play it cool. Just pass by. Be normal. But I didn't move. I kept glancing back. And then she saw me. Her expression changed in an instant. Not surprise. Recognition. Her smile wasn't like the one she gave me at the door that night, it was softer. Warmer. Like she'd been expecting this, somehow. She walked toward me, unhurried. I stood frozen. Hey, she said, stopping just a few steps away. You look familiar. My voice barely worked. I delivered a pizza to you. A few weeks ago. Her eyes lit up with something I couldn't quite name. That's right, she said, tilting her head. The shy delivery guy. I laughed under my breath, mostly from embarrassment. Yeah, that was me. She smiled, but it wasn't teasing. It was kind. You never stayed. I looked away, shrugging like it didn't still echo in my head. I wasn't sure you were serious. I was. There was no accusation in her voice. No pressure. Just honesty. Then she asked, gently, are you busy right now? My brain scrambled for an excuse, but nothing came. Not really. Then walk with me. It wasn't a question, and yet it didn't feel like a demand either. Just an open door. I nodded, and we fell into step side by side, walking slowly under the trees. She asked about school, my job, my future. I told her the truth, I didn't know what I wanted yet. I was figuring it out. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened. She told me she worked in publishing, freelance editing, mostly. That she moved here after a divorce, needed a change. She didn't seem sad about it. Just matter of fact. Like some chapters end without drama, but still leave echoes. And maybe it was the way she spoke, or maybe it was just the relief of being seen, but I found myself talking more than I usually do. About the weird customers. The messes. The quiet parts of life that no one really asks about. She laughed easily, like someone who didn't take herself too seriously. After a while, we reached a small pond. Ducks drifted along the water, unbothered. She stopped, turned slightly toward me, and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes met mine, searching but soft. You're different from most guys I meet, she said. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone like her. Someone who seemed to belong in a better story than mine. Is that a good thing? She smiled. That same calm, knowing smile I remembered. It's a very good thing. I looked down at my shoes, then back at her. She reached into her bag, pulled out a notepad, and scribbled something quickly. Her handwriting was neat, thoughtful. She tore the page out and handed it to me. Her number. I don't do this often, she said quietly. But something tells me, you're worth the risk. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, just enough to stop my breath. I'll let you decide what happens next. And then, just like that, she walked away, disappearing around the curve of the path, sunlight tangled in her hair. I stood there for a long time, the paper still in my hand, her warmth still on my skin. Some moments don't need answers. They just ask if you're ready to change. I waited 3 days to call her. Not because I didn't want to, God, I wanted to, but because my hands wouldn't stop shaking every time I picked up the phone. I kept staring at the piece of paper she gave me like it might vanish if I looked away. It stayed on my nightstand, folded and refolded, like a quiet dare waiting in the dark. It was a Thursday night. Rain tapped softly against the window like it always did, and something in me just cracked open. I grabbed my phone, took a breath I couldn't quite hold, and dialed. It rang once. Then twice. I nearly hung up. Then I heard her voice. Hello? I froze for a second, just long enough to hear my own pulse in my ears. Hey. It's me, Ethan. From the park. And, the pizza. There was a pause, then a soft, low laugh, the kind that felt like warm hands on cold skin. I was beginning to think you lost my number. I almost did, I said, letting out a breath that felt months old. I'm glad you didn't. She said it so simply, but something about the way she said it made my chest ache. I asked her if she wanted to get dinner. She said yes before I could finish the sentence. We picked a small Italian place downtown, nothing fancy, but warm and tucked away between bookshops and bars that always smelled like stories. I got there early and stood outside, too nervous to sit, checking my reflection in every window I passed like it might tell me who I was supposed to be. Then she arrived. She wore a black dress and a beige coat, her hair down, loose, soft like the way her voice curved when she said my name. She walked toward me without hesitation. I forgot how to speak. You clean up nicely, she teased. You look incredible, I said before I could stop myself. She smiled, but there was something behind it. Not surprise, not flattery, just calm. As if she already knew what I'd say. Dinner was slow and easy. Conversation didn't need effort. It moved on its own. We talked about music, books, how she loved old jazz records and wanted to write a novel one day. I told her I wasn't sure what I wanted, that I felt stuck between versions of myself. She didn't try to fix that. She just listened. That was the thing about Claire. She made silence feel full, not empty. Halfway through, I admitted I was nervous to call her. She tilted her head, confused. Why? I didn't think you'd really want to see me again. She reached across the table and touched my hand, just for a second, but it grounded everything. Ethan, she said gently, I wouldn't have given you my number if I didn't want to see you again. That moment stayed with me, even as we left the restaurant. We walked through the city, past neon signs and dim bookstores. The sky was overcast, and the pavement still shimmered from earlier rain. It was late but not quiet, life moved around us, but it felt like we were walking in a different rhythm. We found a small bookstore still open. She wandered through the aisles like she belonged there, smiling at strange titles and pointing out books she loved. At one point, I watched her as she read a blurb on the back of a poetry collection, her finger slowly tracing each line. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Later, we stood beneath a flickering street lamp. She looked at me, her face lit with a kind of tired softness that only comes from laughing for hours. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want the night to end. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, afraid that if I spoke, the moment would break. Come back to my place, she said, quiet but sure. Just to talk. Or whatever we feel like. Only if you're comfortable. She looked at me then, not to seduce, not to persuade, but to ask. Really ask. And something in me finally stopped resisting. I didn't speak. I just nodded. She reached for my hand and held it gently. No squeeze. No pull. Just the warmth of saying, I'm here if you are. We walked in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything unspoken. Sometimes the loudest yes is the one you don't say out loud. Her apartment was only a few blocks from the restaurant, tucked inside a brick building with ivy crawling up its face. We walked up a narrow staircase, our footsteps quiet against the old wood. Neither of us said much. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt necessary, like talking might interrupt whatever was slowly unfolding between us. She opened the door with a soft click and stepped inside first, turning on a small lamp in the corner. The light spilled across the room in warm pools, soft, amber, inviting. Her home felt exactly like her. Thoughtful. Lived in. There were stacks of books in every corner, a record player by the window, a blanket draped over the back of the couch like someone had just been there and left the warmth behind. Make yourself at home, she said, slipping off her coat and heels in one graceful motion. Then she disappeared into the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do with my hands, my coat, or the flutter in my chest. Eventually, I wandered toward her bookshelf and ran my fingers lightly along the spines, titles I didn't recognize but somehow didn't feel intimidated by. She came back holding 2 cups. Chamomile, she said, offering one to me. It helps with nerves. I took it with a sheepish smile. You noticed? She gave a small laugh, the kind that doesn't fill a room but stays with you. I've been around long enough to tell. We sat side by side on the couch. The cushions sank slightly beneath us. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of jazz from the record player and the soft clink of our cups on ceramic coasters. At first, we talked in low tones, childhood stories, favorite authors, embarrassing moments we usually didn't share. Then we didn't talk at all. We just sipped our tea and let the silence settle. It was strange how natural it felt. There was no rush. No pressure to make the night into anything more than what it already was. I wasn't used to that. I was used to noise. Text bubbles, missed calls, vague promises. But this? This was quiet. Safe. Real. After a while, she set her cup down and leaned back, folding one leg beneath her. Her eyes searched mine in the kind of silence that asked questions without asking them. Do you know why I asked you to stay that night? She said, barely above a whisper. I shook my head. No. I still don't. She looked down for a second, brushing her hair behind her ear like the words needed room. Then she looked back at me. Because you're different. You're genuine. I was curious. I still am. She reached out, fingers brushing gently against my arm. It wasn't a move. It wasn't meant to lead anywhere. It was just a touch, light, thoughtful, grounding. And then, something shifted. I don't know who leaned in first. Maybe we both did, like some invisible thread had pulled us toward the same center. Our lips met, tentative and soft. No fireworks. No music swell. Just warmth. Familiarity. A slow kind of recognition. It deepened, slowly. Every second felt earned. And I won't describe every detail. Some things don't need to be shared. But I will say this, it wasn't about heat or hunger or escape. It wasn't fast. It wasn't reckless. It was careful. Present. Every glance. Every breath. Every pause. Like we were learning a language neither of us had ever spoken, but somehow already understood. Afterward, we lay side by side. I rested my head on her shoulder, listening to her breathe. The rain had started again, barely tapping against the window, like a gentle reminder that the world was still moving outside. She traced slow circles on my arm with her fingertip. It was soothing. Almost hypnotic. Then, without turning her head, she whispered something. "You gave me something I thought I'd never feel again." I shifted slightly to look at her, only half seeing her face in the dim light. "What's that?" I asked. She smiled, eyes heavy but clear. "Hope." I didn't respond. I just let the words settle between us. I wasn't sure what kind of hope she meant, hope for love, or for herself, or maybe just for moments like this. Maybe it didn't matter. We fell asleep like that, bodies curved gently together, wrapped in the kind of quiet you never want to leave. The next morning was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Soft light poured through the curtains, catching little dust motes in the air. Her room smelled faintly like vanilla and linen and something I couldn't name but now associate only with her. I woke before she did. She was still curled beside me, her face turned slightly toward the window, strands of red hair falling across her cheek. I didn't want to move. I just watched her breathe, steady and slow, as if nothing in the world could touch her in that moment. And maybe nothing could. The warmth of her body next to mine, the way our hands had found each other sometime in the night, it all felt too perfect to belong to real life. Eventually, she stirred, eyes fluttering open. When she looked at me, she didn't say anything at first. She just smiled. That small, sleepy kind of smile that only appears when your guard is all the way down. "Good morning," she whispered. "Morning," I whispered back. We lay like that for a while, not needing to fill the space with words. It was enough just to be there, together, in that tiny, fragile morning. Eventually, she sat up, reached for her robe, and said something about making coffee. I watched her move around the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times, calm, practiced, graceful in the way only someone who's lived alone for a while can be. She poured us each a mug and we sat at the small table by the window. We didn't talk much. Just passed quiet smiles and let the steam from our cups blur the air between us. I wanted to ask what this meant. What we were now. What happened next. But I didn't. It felt like the kind of morning you don't question, only experience. When I finally glanced at the clock, reality nudged its way in. I had to go. I stood awkwardly by the door, unsure of how to say goodbye to something that didn't feel over. She walked me out, barefoot, her hand resting lightly on my arm as I reached for the doorknob. "I'm glad you stayed," she said quietly. I nodded, swallowing the sudden ache that rose in my chest. "Me too." She leaned in and kissed me, soft and slow, with a kind of certainty that made my head spin. Then she pulled back just a little, her fingers still resting against my sleeve. "Call me?" she asked. "Definitely," I said. And I meant it. The walk home felt like floating. The streets looked different somehow. Softer. Brighter. I couldn't stop smiling. My body moved on autopilot while my mind stayed curled up next to her, sipping coffee and memorizing her every glance. I didn't know what we were or where this was going, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. It was enough just to feel this way. I texted her later that day. Just something simple, "I had an amazing time. Can't wait to see you again." No reply. I told myself she was busy. Maybe she'd fallen asleep, maybe she'd gone out for groceries, maybe her phone had died. The next morning, still nothing. 2 days passed. Then 4. I sent another message, this time more hesitant. Hey, hope everything's okay. Just thinking of you. Still silence. I tried calling. It rang. No voicemail. Just the hollow sound of a call unanswered. I told myself not to panic, not to spiral. But I felt it happening anyway. That sinking, heavy pull in my stomach. The echo of doubt getting louder with every hour. I called again. And again. Each time the same result. Nothing. Eventually, I stopped sleeping. I just lay there at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night in her apartment. The way she'd touched my arm. The way she'd said hope. Was it me? Did I misread everything? Had I imagined the closeness? The warmth? A week later, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I still had her address. I told myself I wasn't being crazy, I just needed closure. That's all. Just something to fill the silence. I went in the afternoon, when the sky was overcast and the streets felt oddly quiet. Her building looked the same. Same ivy on the walls. Same creaky steps that groaned beneath my weight. I stood at her door and knocked. No answer. I waited. Knocked again. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. The apartment sounded empty. Like no one had been there in days. I walked downstairs and found the building manager in the tiny office near the front. He looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Claire," I said, trying to sound casual. He furrowed his brow, scanning a clipboard. "Claire Bennett?" She moved out. I blinked. "What?" "About a week and a half ago," he said. "No forwarding address. Paid up, handed in the keys." That was it. I stood there, frozen, as his words sank in. She was gone. Just like that. No note. No goodbye. And suddenly, the quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow. The days after I found out she was gone didn't feel like days at all. They felt like static. I went to class, nodded through conversations, delivered pizza to the same doors. But nothing felt real. My body moved, but my thoughts stayed behind, caught in the quiet of her empty apartment, in the soft click of a door that had closed without a sound. I kept checking my phone, even though I knew nothing would come. I stared at the screen like maybe I could will her name to appear. I even typed out messages I never sent. They ranged from simple, "Are you okay?" to things I didn't even understand myself, like did I do something wrong? Or please just tell me it meant something. I walked through the park where we met, more than once. Hoping. Pretending I was just there to get fresh air. But I wasn't. I looked for her in every face that passed, every voice that carried on the wind. She never appeared. And slowly, I stopped expecting her to. For a while, I hated myself for how much I missed her. I told myself it was stupid. That I'd only known her for a moment in the grand scheme of things. But time didn't matter. Something about her had slipped under my skin in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about the kiss, or the night, or the way her fingers found mine. It was the way she saw me. Like I wasn't just passing through. She made me feel like I mattered. And losing that without warning, it hurt in places I didn't know existed. One evening, a week or two later, I found myself walking without a destination. The city was glowing in that in-between hour, when the sky is still holding on to light, but the street lamps are already flickering awake. I passed by the bookstore we wandered through. The little restaurant where we laughed about bad poetry titles. And finally, I stopped beneath the streetlight where she'd asked me if I wanted the night to end. I stood there for a long time. Hands in my pockets. Eyes on the pavement. Heart somewhere else entirely. I don't know how long I stood there, just breathing, existing. But something softened in me. Slowly. Gently. Like a door unlocking in a room I didn't know I had. And I realized, I didn't regret it. Not 1 second. Not even the silence that followed. Because for a brief moment, I had something rare. Real. She gave me something no one else had ever managed to, the courage to believe that someone like me could be wanted, could be worth the risk. That I could matter, not just in the background of someone's day, but right in the center of it. I think that's what she meant, when she whispered hope. Maybe she didn't run. Maybe she just needed to go. Maybe she knew it wouldn't last, but still wanted to share it anyway. And maybe, just maybe, some people aren't meant to stay. They're meant to arrive, quietly, change you, and leave you gentler than they found you. I walked home slower than usual that night. Not because I was sad. But because I wasn't rushing anymore. I didn't need to fill the silence. I didn't need answers. I just needed to carry what she left behind in me. When I reached my apartment, I paused on the steps. Looked up at the sky. It was almost clear, with a few stars trying their best to be seen through the city haze. I closed my eyes and whispered something I didn't even know I was holding. Thank you, Claire. And I meant it. Not for staying. But for teaching me I could.